Okay, welcome to the ACI-LAC and Munich Airport International webinar called The End of the Stop and Go Process. In today's webinar, we have the pleasure to count with our speaker, Lutz Weiser, Managing Director at Munich Airport International. Before we start, we would like to share with you that as usual, we have simultaneous interpretation. You could select Spanish or English in the Zoom menu where is the globe icon. Besides, if you don't want to hear the original audio, please click on mute original audio. And as can you recall from other webinars, the chat function is disabled. And in case you want to ask any questions to the speaker, you will have to send it to the email that you find on the screen, info@aci-lac.io. The Q&A session will take place at the end of the presentation. So now I would like to give the floor to Lutz.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you so much. Thank you again thank you for having me again. And a big apology for everybody for not being able to speak Spanish, but my Spanish is really so bad. You can't even apologize for it. And sorry to our excellent translator, because I always go off script as I'm doing right now. So I'm sure he's going to have a hard time. So apologies to him as well. The end of the stop and go process. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about the status quo and the pain points. And I'm sure there's lots of pain points in the process for a passenger, and we'll talk about some of those. And we'll try to introduce or talk about some of the innovations in the different processes that are already in place in a lot of airports. And then depending on the regulations and depending on the stakeholder management, some work better than others. And certain continents in certain countries, it is easier to introduce innovation. Some others, it's much more restrictive. And of course, it all comes down to data transfer, data protection, giving up your own data, giving up the data of your bags, giving up data in the process, trying to organize data sharing between the different partners in the various processes that we have. And then I'm hoping for a lively dialogue with everybody. The next slide, please. And this one really shows it all. I just selected the biggest 6 stop and go processes. I'm sure there's a lot more. When we go to the airport, when we go on a flight, when we go on a journey, when we try to get from point A to point B, when we try to get from airport 1 to airport 2, when we try to book a flight, when we try to board a flight, we're constantly asked, who are you? Prove it to me. Whoever is asking, whether it's a machine, whether it's an automatic board card reader, whether it's a policeman, whether it's a check-in agent, if you go to a full-service counter, whether it's somebody that is just trying to help you, you constantly ask to prove who you are. And you have to have a piece of identification, a national ID card, a credit card. It used to be in the US, you just needed a credit card, a passport, a biometric passport, a passport that doesn't have the right stamps in it, because then that prohibits you from going to some other countries. We all know the problem. So the first stop and go is, who are you? Prove it to me or to the machine or to the process that you are. And I'm sure if you start counting how many times you actually have to prove who you are until you've boarded your aircraft and then arrived safely at the curbside, taking a taxi at the other airport, it's just, half a dozen certainly is not enough. And then the next stop and go process, the next stop and the trying to go process is, where are you going? Prove it to me. Okay, you've proven that you're Lutz, and now you have to prove again to the airline, to the immigration officer, to lots of different stakeholders, where are you going? Are you going to Paris? Are you going to Lima? Are you going domestic? Are you going international? In Europe, of course, we call that Schengen or non-Schengen. Do you have access to the international part of the airport? Are you allowed to emigrate? Where are you going? Prove it to me. And where is that data stored? Is it just on the boarding pass? Is it just within your passport? There's lots of different stakeholders that have that data. If you are leaving, if you are going to the United States, you've given out lots of data to the CBP, to the Customs and Border Protection Agency, and your data is being checked while you fly to the United States for 6, 7, 8 hours before you arrive. And the algorithm, or maybe sometimes a person, makes it check whether you're allowed in or not. So where are you going? Prove it to me. And then the next one is a real biggie. Is a really big data transfer and a really big stop. Is this your bag? Prove it to me. And then I'll check it anyway. It's sort of, I don't believe you, because this is something funny, because they put a little piece of paper onto the bag, and then all of a sudden that proves that this bag belongs to you. I find that really sort of 1970s like. And there's very few instances on how you can improve that. A lot of people, a lot of us really, a lot of passengers put AirTags from Apple, and there's other products out there as well, inside your underwear now, in order to know where your bag is. Because sometimes you yourself, through such a simple device, privately know more about where your bag is than an airline or some other stakeholder. And then, of course, you have to prove again, where's your bag going? And then the worst one of them all, do you carry anything dangerous in your bag? Prove it to me. And then if you say, no, it's been with me all the time, I packed it myself, you still have to be checked, and not your bag, even yourself, because nobody believes you that you're not dangerous as you're moving into the airside, safe, the clean area of an airport. And then maybe the last one, where you're really being asked after in another check, typically in the process, immigration, passport controls through a completely different entity, border police, federal police, allowing you to the international side. Is it you boarding the aircraft? Another stop, and another go only if you prove that this is Lutz sitting on 21C, or whatever your seat is, going through the boarding check at gate 21A of the terminal, trying to get to Paris or trying to get to a domestic flight inside a certain country. And what that leads to is just frustration, and of course, stress, and lots of things can go wrong throughout this process, and lots of things go wrong. Even all of us who are experienced travelers see other passengers that are missing something. They forgot to check a box somewhere, checking online. And even a lot of things are happening online now. It's still sort of mundane once you get to the airport. So this is what I'm trying to talk about in the next couple of minutes. And what can happen if these processes are not as seamless as everybody claims them to be. We can see on the next slide, please. And these are just random pictures from our airport, from other airports. Even in a peak situation, or even in a regular situation, usually you have lots of queues, long queuing lines that immediately build up. Terribly, or very long lines if you're trying to check a bag. Even if you have kiosks, the two-step process in order to print your own baggage tag, because everybody has so much luggage and everybody has a question, everybody needs an exception. So you build up these queues, which lead to further delays. And then, of course, if there's any kind of irregularity, the two bottom pictures, for instance, if there's any kind of irregularity, a flight gets canceled, there's a bad weather situation, something happens, there's a computer glitch, Then, of course, you have an enormous build-up, both landside or even airside in front of rebooking service counters. And that's something you really want to avoid because that leads to even further further decline of service and further stress and further frustration from everybody involved. And the customer expectation remains the same. On the next slide, please. It's so simple, right? The customer expectation of an airport is get the flights punctual, get the baggage handling sorted, have efficient and convenience operations, really have that seamless and touchless travel journey that you promised me if you're an airline or if you're an airport. Have very easy orientation, even if I'm wearing glasses, even if I'm of the autistic spectrum, even if I don't really know where I'm going, even if I'm old and don't know what's happening, even if I'm young and don't know what's happening. I need easy orientation and easy navigation. I want to feel in control of the process. Of course, the airport needs to be a really nice place as an experience in itself, right? And I think to get that going is so easy. And of course, I'm being a little bit sarcastic. And I hope that translation in Spanish can catch that as well. But this thing is so hard. And the customer experience strategy, which I'm very briefly outlining on the next slide, please, is really creating a great customer experience through 4 basic pillars. And that means segmentation. We have very different customers. We have very different passenger segments. We have frequent travelers, we have business travelers, we have old people, we have male people, we have diverse people, we have female people, we have young kids, we have families, we have all kinds of people from all walks of life, almost like society in itself. Some know exactly what they're doing, some want to be left alone, some want to be held their hand. And that's why it's very difficult, but we need to have automation. We need to use the technology and automated processes to execute that kind of customer strategy. And very soon, of course, the personal touch will almost be the exception. And then, of course, we need to orchestrate these kind of segmentation and automation and bring together the data, which I talked about earlier, and trying to connect all the data touch points that we have in order to have the best customer experience possible. We also need to personalize the experience, create a unique experience for every customer, and thus guaranteeing the execution of such a customer experience. Next slide. Let's look at some of the processes and some of the innovation that is already happening and that have proven successful. I think the biometrics is something that is very common nowadays, but it's been incredibly difficult to agree on a common technology. Facial recognition now leads definitely as far as biometrics, as far as the use of biometrics is concerned. We need to find a, as you can read in the quote, measurable physical characteristic or a personal behavior trait used to recognize the identity or verify the claimed identity. This goes back to who are you, prove it to me, of any applicant. Facial images, fingerprints, and iris scan samples are examples of biometrics. And here you have, as far as facial recognition is concerned, an excellent example of, for instance, the US, where you have different programs. One is called Global Entry. You have to pay in order to register. And I was just re-registered on Monday. It's a 5-year program, and it's fantastic. The entry to the US for me takes now about 4 seconds because I literally walk by a camera, very briefly stop. I don't have to show my passport because I showed the passport when I checked in and when I had additional doc check, special US. even here in Munich. I'm in Munich, as you know. So no showing of the passport. And then literally 4 seconds after showing my face, system will tell you proceed. And then as you proceed towards an officer who doesn't sit in a booth, who's just sort of standing around, looks at an iPad and says, "Oh, thank you, Lutz, please proceed." Very rarely he'll ask you a question. Of course, they have a random check, probably like 1% or 3%. But the facial recognition there is paramount, and it works, and there is a whole database behind it. And it takes me a lot shorter to go to a foreign country like the US, which I just described, and coming back to my own country. In Germany, you still have to scan your passport into a machine, then something reads it, and then there's an algorithm checking it, and it literally takes 2 minutes, 2 full minutes, which, as we all know, in process times is an eternity. So this is something you want to get rid of. The stop and go processes traditionally include multiple steps. So you have these stressful interactions between passengers and redundant checks. That's what you want to get rid of through, for instance, facial recognition, and get rid of the long waiting times and just have a more satisfied passengers. More to internal checks, you have fingerprint scans. And what we have, for instance, at the Berlin airport, I also have a Berlin airport tag because it's my hometown, is the live palm vein scanners. So you basically present your identity card, your airport card, and then they scan sort of the beginning of your hand. And that is almost, they claim, the safest way of identifying somebody, because you can always try to wear a mask. You can definitely hack somebody's finger off and use that, or get a print of a fingerprint. Even facial recognition, you can sort of build a mask that has the exact replication. Whereas the palm vein scanners, they need the hot blood, so they can detect whether you've hacked somebody's hand off or whether there's a pulse. I like that very much, and I think my wife likes it too, because if I make it through there, I'm still alive. So whatever will be the next technology, for most of the easiest way to identify passengers in a mass sort of scenario, hundreds, thousands of people, is probably facial recognition, because you can also use the walking person, and we'll get to that, the tunnel of trust and so forth. But this really is a new era of efficiency and convenience for the passengers. So you have these kind of cutting edge technologies to promise a high level of improvement across the board. But it means a comprehensive transformation of most of the upper processes. And you need to introduce all kinds of cameras and databases. Let's go to the next page, please. So what you need to establish is an effective verification process. Let's hope that all biometric characteristics are generally, I like that, are unique to the individual that they belong to. And of course, this makes it more effective to uniquely verify individuals' identities and other message, such as old passport that just has your passport pictures from 40 years ago in black and white. And of course, also knowledge-based verification systems, a password or a PIN or a token-based system. Your kids can be kidnapped, and then you give up the PIN or your password, and all kinds of problems can arise. So the biometrics really offer the best effective verification process, and thus also minimizing fraud. I was talking about the hot blood of the hand, short of giving you a pulse and your blood pressure, something like that, or your DNA, that might be in the future. This is really something that's very unique to you, that you are not only showing your face and you have the biometrics, but you're also proving that you are alive and that you're actually a person. And you really need to find something that cannot be copied or are not as easily shared as something like a mask. And the great thing about airports is, and I guess that's why we, for instance, at Munich Airport International are able to operate airports in different continents and different countries, because the data and the regulations are very similar. It started with FAA, of course, by demanding that all aircraft adhere to a certain regulation and all airports as well. So that a plane that starts in Denver and lands in Tokyo, that's probably too long, that starts in Hawaii and lands in Tokyo, finds the same kind of characteristic runways and so forth as wingtip clearances. And now we have the same kind of availability or the same kind of opportunity to roll out these biometrics. Of course, beyond reducing the waiting times and the operational efficiency, these biometric usages offer just a precise identification, and that means less identity theft. Very, very, very rarely. I mean, it's like once a year, literally, a passenger makes it onto an aircraft with a different identity. Becomes extremely difficult, and this is throughout billions of passengers traveled. So we can see that the system is pretty efficient, and especially if you use more biometric identification, you can fortify your border control. You can automate identity verification. You don't need to talk to somebody, and just improve the passenger experience. And also, what is being used for some countries, Israel is probably on the forefront for that, using psychology and precise questioning of certain passengers. That's being used by a couple of countries where you're not only being identified as Lutz, but your intentions of travel are also being questioned and identified. So even if you have no history of malfeasance, no criminal record, no terror record, God forbid, they can find out on your behavior. So even if you are now through biometrics checked, and if you are now identified, then of course the next level of identification is, what are your intentions? Are you a good passenger? Are you a peaceful passenger? But that's something that leaves, of course, the realm of biometrics, and is usually an extra stop and go process, certainly a stop and go process, because you're introduced to a couple of questions, and they claim to be able to identify your intentions within 5 or 6 questions. So check-in. Next slide, please. What is that? You know, if you go back to the original process, who are you? Prove it to me. Can we have your face serve as your identity card? Of course we can. We can utilize cameras to capture all the travelers' facial images, employ advanced algorithm to analyze and compare them with pre-existing database of known individuals, not just compare the passport to your face, but really just your face as you're walking towards a passport control, pretty much like the global entry system I was talking about in the US, or using your facial recognition, if you're willing to check that box, as you're walking towards a kiosk or as you're walking towards a check-in counter with your bag. And then all of a sudden, you're not talking about a stop process, because you're just walking towards a camera, probably a series of cameras. And then that radically reduces queues and expedites the whole journey. And of course, this expedites the overall check-in procedure, and especially with your bag, and we'll get to that. And you can swiftly move through the check-in process with a simple facial scan. The fingerprint is coming out of fashion more and more. Next slide, please. If we look at, for instance, Lufthansa Star Alliance, what we're using at Munich Airport, for instance. We do have heightened security through biometrics. We have enhanced efficiency. We have seamless integration with other security measures. So that data that's primarily being produced by Lufthansa, because you bought a Lufthansa ticket, I'm sure other airlines have the same kind of solution, is being shared with some other of the security services. And then that all results in a reduction in time and resources needed for manual procedures. And all of a sudden, you have a comprehensive security solution. Let's look at the baggage journey. Next slide, please. I find these. Carla, can you go to the next slide? Oh, yeah, this is the beginning. Thank you. Yeah, goes back to your bag. Is this your bag? Prove it to me. We need to find out what's the next solution. The sort of bag tag is actually a very unsecure process because you can very easily get one tag ripped off one bag and put it on another. And of course, then of course you have different ownership. It still goes through the inline security measures, but it's really something that is not quite fixed with the bag. I was mentioning the Apple iTags, AirTags before, and it's very simple RFID technology. Apple has it down to if anybody walks by, so it's not a device that actually gives off a huge signal that's then caught by a satellite or something. All of our iPhones actually, and I'm sure you know that, catch that little signal, and then throughout the masses of people, it gets transported. And if you have a car parked in a car park where nobody walks in or out for a couple of days, then the last data point is from Friday, and today is Thursday. And then that's just it. So it needs the sort of swarm intelligence. So is RFID technology, because that's in essence what it is, something that we can look at as far as automatic tracking of luggage throughout the baggage handling system without the need of direct line of sight scanning, because the bag tags, as we know them, need to have a direct access to a scanner. And that's why you have the additional little gluey stickers on other sides of your bag. And what does that do to the chances of baggage mishandling? Let's look at the next slide, please. An excellent example is Qantas. I think if you use Qantas for the second time in the domestic network, they give you 2 Q-bag tags for free, and you can put them on the outside of your baggage, but you can also throw them in with your T-shirts. And then these, through an extremely simple process, these tags are linked to you as a person. So if you check a flight, or if you buy a flight from Melbourne to Sydney, the system knows, okay, Lutz wants to go to Sydney. And then all of a sudden your bag shows up because you actually have a bag to check in and not just hand luggage. Then the system immediately says, oh, okay, this bag belongs to Lutz. So the chances that this bag wants to go to Sydney as well is almost 100%. So we're going to take that bag, and from now on, it's going to Sydney, whatever happens. So this all of a sudden eliminates the stressful and complicated step and stop in the stop and go process of printing a bag tag. So you literally take that bag. You don't have to do a single thing. You've connected that bag tag with you yourself. You've bought a ticket to Sydney. The system knows, you have 1 bag tag. Oh, two show up in the system. Okay, those 2 bags go to Sydney. And then if you, for some reason, you have a third one, system will say, okay, you're probably going to have to pay overweight. And they'll ask you to insert a credit card to buy that third bag, or reject it, and you have to see an agent and start complaining. So you don't have a temporary baggage label on the suitcase required. And I think it's the best system that I've come across. Point is, of course, this only works in a closed system. So that's why it works in Qantas, domestic only. If the flight from Perth to London direct, London Heathrow has a different system, so this doesn't work. But if you have a closed system, it works brilliantly. And maybe that's the system we all want to roll out for all of our airport moving into the future. And so I think what we need is some ideas, thinking outside of the box. There was a great, at that time, everybody thought, okay, this is it. There was a luggage supplier, Rimowa, kind of big, and they teamed up with Lufthansa for an electronic bag tag on sort of like integrated into the small side of the luggage. You had to book it. You had to sort of program it. I am going to Sydney. I'm going to Berlin from Munich. It was a little bit cumbersome, but the worst thing was it needed power. So it had a small lithium battery built in, and that proved to be the end of it. So that was a dead end. And there's a couple of other dead ends, but we really need to do something with the bags, because they're going to be checked forever, whether something bad is in there, whether a bomb is in there. But at least we can identify the bag belonging to Lutz or to anybody precisely, and make it automated, make it an automatic process of this bag being recognized as wanting to go to Sydney, same as the owner of the bag. Then, of course, the hand baggage and the screening, the whole screening process. Excuse me. Next slide, please. And this has been integrated in a whole bunch of airports already. We have CTX machines now for the screening of the hand luggage, so you don't have to take anything out. It's more like an MRT in the clinics. You have the 3D view facilities. You can leave the liquids and the electronic devices in the hand luggage. And what's more important, you can have up to 4, in some systems 5 passengers sort of line up and take their own time in putting everything into the trays. Because if you stand behind a family, or if you stand behind somebody that has a problem, you just have to wait. With this system, you can bypass and not make the other person feel pressure. If you need 4 minutes to take everything off, then you need 4 minutes to take everything off. If you need 5 minutes, then that's your own speed. If you need 40 seconds, that's your own speed again. So it really relieves the stress for people that are maybe wearing a coat and a waistcoat and a belt and whatever it is in winter. And others are already in summertime and just wear a t-shirt and nothing and just throw everything onto the tray. And then, of course, it makes it much more secure as far as the X-raying or the actual view of what you're carrying. And we also feel that is absolutely great. Next slide, please. These are the integration of some of the biometrics in the security screens and, of course, in immigration as well. And goes back to who are you, prove it. You have the accurate identification through biometric solutions. They're incredibly accurate and reliable, much more reliable than any person can ever be. There you have, through the facial recognition, you have a very precise identification of every individual. And then, of course, you have the kids, you have the babies, but you always need that kind of parallel process as well. Well, what happens? It really prevents impersonation of other people. So these biometrics make it very difficult for individuals to identify identity theft and just eliminate unauthorized access to secure area. So then all of a sudden you really have a streamlined security screening, and you just really accelerate security screening. With the introduction of these new methods in Munich Terminal 2, we've almost eliminated queuing. So we have a very elaborate system of telling everybody, okay, from here on, you're going to queue 10 minutes, 15 minutes. There's no need for that anymore because the throughput has been enhanced so much. And then, of course, the border control can utilize the same systems for the international flights. And what happens is it becomes very easy to identify and detect high-risk individuals, people on no-fly zones, people that already have a warrant outstanding. So these kind of processes have become much more easier. But then, of course, some other countries, especially outside of the UA, next of the EU, European Union. Next slide, please, Carla. Have no, I think one more. Okay, this is what I wanted to talk about. Looking at the time, other countries have it even better. You have this sort of smart tunnels or tunnels of trust, whatever you want to talk, whatever you want to call them. All of a sudden, you know, not all of a sudden, you have the integration of these technologies into certain areas where you just sort of walk by and through, you know, half a dozen cameras or a dozen cameras, passengers are recognized, and the identification rate is well above 95%. Of course, you need to sign on to these systems at home. Everybody has a camera, either in your iPhone or, as I'm speaking to you right now, through your laptop. And then you just have these 80 plus face and iris scanning cameras, and they have this incredibly high facial recognition percentage. And then you completely eliminate the stop process and the stop and go process because you're identified as you're walking through a certain area, which you need to walk through anyway, because you need to get to the next process. So these are, of course, tremendous advantages. It really helps passengers speed up the travel procedures. It reduces human intervention. It really replaces security lines and e-gates, and just no more queuing in line. And we just wish we could make it that simple, where you literally, you know, you arrive at the airport, your iPhone or whatever system you're using says, "Oh, good morning, Lutz. We're so glad you're back. We see that you're flying back to Munich. Last time you were here, you had a beer. We have a special on the beer, or whatever you did last time. Or we see you're traveling without your wife. Maybe you want to have a smoke. No need to if you take the tunnel of trust, there's no need to be identified by a passport officer. So we suggest you go to the left. If you have a question this time, take a line to see a live agent. Of course, you will always need to have that. But it becomes a very simple process. Next, these biometrics. Next slide, please. These biometrics can, of course, also be used to board an aircraft, because is it you boarding the aircraft? Prove it to me. It's very cumbersome. All of us have stood in line in different groups. When, you know, in the US, they have the active military, they have the people with reduced mobility, they have all kinds of people. They're calling up before even the families can board, pre-boarding, group one, whatever it's called. And the implementation of the biometric scanning, you can scan an entire A380 in less than 20 minutes. And that just shows the remarkable efficiency gains that are possible. So the use of face recognition in the boarding system. It really plays a pivotal role. It reduces wait times, and it will be to the point where you actually walk by face recognition. Now you still have to stop at least for a second or two for the system to read your face. Very soon it'll just be sort of walking by, and we were talking about, I was talking about the 80 plus cameras, not the half a dozen, but the 80 plus cameras that really make sure it is you as you're walking towards throughout the tunnel of trust that we were talking about before. So this is something that is available, that is implemented, that is integrated, that is not just an airline using it, the airport as well. There is a certain data sharing among some of these stakeholders. But of course, it's still difficult to have a full transparency because, especially in the EU, there's, as we all know, a certain limitation to as far as the sharing of the data is concerned. Next slide, please. Thank you. The passenger experience can also be enhanced by improved by the personalization by the personalization, and that happens through data. All of us crave convenience, but also control. And as sensing and analytics capabilities advance, airports can really revolutionize the journey through hyper-personalization. The system knows this is Lutz. I've proven with my face or with my hand or with my blood pulsing through my veins that I'm Lutz. So then all of a sudden, the system in real time knows, oh, Lutz has passed through checkpoint 5 or is moving towards the Chanel shop. And then, of course, you can receive boarding status, weather updates, currency converters, cultural recommendations. You can receive point-to-point walking time information, also based on your personal status. If you're 24, you're likely to walk a little faster and take time for 4 minutes. If you're older, you're probably going to take 8 minutes. So you can really personalize your journey very, very easily through assumptions and through, of course, utilization of your data. And you can receive just-in-time updates on flight status. Of course, these sensors provide feedback on heat, on noise, and certain foot traffic, and that optimizes operations and plane turnarounds as well. If you have a connecting flight, and then of course, if the passenger, give permission, you can utilize even seat senders in-flight entertainment, meal choices, individual lighting, for instance. Your seat is pre-programmed for your individual routines. And even the wellness can be detected because your Fitband or whatever utilize, or even your iPhone, your watch can give that kind of data. And then you have these sort of automatic satisfaction surveys, which could refine the model over time. So what is important is you empower the choices at different touch points. Of course, preferred with consent-based personalization. Yes, I consent to you sharing my data with others. You need to sort of be able to opt out, of course. And then all of a sudden you can shift as an airport, from a purely transactional transport mode change. I have left the car, the train, the bus, and I'm now entering an aircraft into a really memorable experience that can then build lifelong loyalty. Because that's what we're hoping for, that all of our passengers love the airline, but love the airport as well. Let's look at what Zurich, for instance, is doing on the next slide. They've developed a platform that's not an app. You don't need to download anything, but you can, it's sort of the maximized personalization through data examples and data sharing. The beginning is the Wi-Fi. And then all of a sudden, the web page, their newsletter, the commercial offering, messengers, and wayfinding is completely integrated. All the flight data is integrated. They have what they call a content hub, where they share content with you based on your customer profile. And of course, they have a completely integrated commerce platform with lots of food and beverage. You always have your journey at a glance. You have, of course, the ability to navigate throughout the airport. All of the train system, the bus system, several airlines are completely integrated. So for instance, you arrive on a Swissair flight or on an Air France flight, and you want to take the train, it's all on the same platform, and you can even pay on it. It's quite amazing. And this is the kind of integration I think that we all would look for and would give our passengers the best satisfaction. Of course, the parking is integrated in any kind of discovery you want to make on your commercial offer. Which leads us to the last topic, which is data protection concerns. And I just want to briefly, thank you, Carla, talk about this. And I said it throughout this little lecture, that you need to be able to opt out of any of this kind of data sharing, and you need to be able to opt out of any of these commercial offers. But more often than not, Zurich has an incredibly high penetration rate. We in Munich have a very high penetration rate as well. If you look at the percentage of people willing up to give data, it's very, very high. So we have to make sure that the data protection regulation is providing this kind of opting out possibilities. And if you look at the use of biometric technologies and systems, it's really expanding significantly within the public and private sectors. You would not believe the outcry it created in German cities when certain policing agencies wanted to have public cameras, which have been the standard in the UK and London for years, for decades, really. But the public wouldn't want security cameras just in public places. So it is going to be expanding, and we can't stop it, but we need to make sure that facial recognitions, voice recognition, iris scanning, or other systems are really accurate, and they're really advanced, and they can be integrated into people's daily lives without making it a social policing system, where if you cross a red light, you're being penalized, or even your credit score, like in some countries, your credit score goes down, certainly your social scores. And we really have to be careful that that doesn't happen. We need to include the privacy. We need to address the privacy issues and have that opting out, as I was talking about. And we need to make sure that we still have the possibility of having a human interface, and also deal with the false positives or errors in identification, because nothing is ever 150%. And then, of course, different privacy laws around the world will define personal information, sensitive information differently. The US, in some areas, is extremely strict. In some areas, they're not. And this kind of sensitive information needs to be especially protected. And so all of those systems need to have appropriate safeguards to ensure the protection of traveler's privacy and address potential issues. That was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you lots. Before we start the Q&A session, we would like to remind you that in case you have any questions, please send it to info@ac-lac.io. Lots, we have some questions for you here. The first one says, are there differences between countries regarding data protection regulations?
That's a question. Oh, sure. There's vast differences. between not just the Western world, the so-called developed world, emerging countries, and some others. Obviously, if you are a country, if you're a dictatorship, you have different objectives for the usage of data than an EU country. Or even if you are prone to how should I say that? Let's take the US, for instance. There, the data sharing is much more common than it is in the EU. So there's really a vast difference. Some countries don't have any regulation because they have to deal with different problems, food, feeding people, or even getting a safe airport altogether. But there's really a vast difference. And I'm sure there's lots of people taking advantage of that. Think of all the hacks that are out there, the cyber warfare. So there's really different levels of protection as well. So even if you have the data protection regulation in place, other countries, other troops will try to hack that. So yes, the answer is absolutely yes. There's a very big difference in different countries of data usage and data sharing and data protection.
Okay. I have another one here. Are there concerns that biometric data, such as fingerprints, can be abused?
Absolutely. And I think we talked about this during a couple of times. Whenever you have a sensitive information like face recognition or even DNA or other behavioral tracking data available, that can be utilized to blackmail you, to find out where you are when you're a high-wealth individual. Absolutely. Are there concerns? The answer is absolutely yes, yes, yes. There are big concerns about making sure that the biometric data that is available is not being misused.
Great. Let's see, we have another one here. From which channels do airports derive passengers' data? And how can those data be shared?
It really depends on where you are. Of course, we in Munich, for instance, have as soon as you connect to our Wi-Fi, you consent to certain data sharing, as with a lot of other airports. So you're giving up a limited number of, but a lot of data in essence. A lot more data than, let's say, 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, when that wasn't even the case. So that's one touch point, connecting to our Wi-Fi, which an enormous amount of people do. And, give a name, give an email address. And then, of course, every time you go through a touch point, for instance, board card readers are installed at queuing times, at the start of queues, security, and also board card readers are mandatory for any purchase. We can't store the data that it is Lutz that bought a ticket, but we can store the data under the European data protection laws that a passenger, a male passenger going to Sydney bought a gallon of whiskey. That's the kind of data we get from a purchase through because it's mandatory to show your boarding pass. There's limited but a very important channel where we share data with the airline. So we definitely know that 185 people will be, depending on their arrival curve, will be coming to the airport and going to Sydney between 9 a.m. in the morning and 11 a.m. in the morning. And then when they show up, the data sort of trickles down, and then there's an algorithm saying, dear airline, 95% of the passengers to Sydney have passed through security because the system knows. So you can safely start boarding because it will be another 10, 15 minutes until you finish boarding. So during that time, another 95% of the 5% that are missing will show up for boarding. And then you'll always have the one late passenger or the one passenger that doesn't make a connecting flight or his train is late. I think somewhere else. So those are the three main channels that we as an airport in Munich get data from.
Great. I have another question here. What does Munich Airport do in regard to biometrics?
That's a pretty broad question. I think I answered most of it as far as the different touch points is concerned. We do have the cooperation with the federal police. We have the cooperation with Lufthansa, our biggest client, as far as the airline is concerned. We have then, of course, our own security system for employees, which of course is much more strict and much more stringent, that lifeblood I was talking about before. So there's lots of biometric integration already as we speak.
Great. I believe we have another one, and it's the last
Mm-hmm.
one. Can you give an example how to personalize passenger communication?
Personalized passenger communication. Well, we are involved. We operate a terminal in Newark, and I think the question goes to how do I as an airport operator, for instance, or as an airline, communicate with the passenger? And ideally, you would get a notification. Your flight is tomorrow. Please check in. Make sure that tomorrow the weather calls for rain, so you wear a hat or a coat. Where you're going is really icy, so make sure you wear a warm coat as well, because when you get to Alaska, we see that's where you're going. It's going to be -20. And then you have lots of additional possible personalized communication when you actually make it to the airport. Oh, you're going to be late. You're running a little late. We advise you go to the gate straight away, or you have lots of time. I'm glad you showed up early. We'd like to invite you to the lounge, and we'll promise you a fantastic meal. You have time enough to go to the buffet. And so forth and so forth. So there's really lots of active communication from an airport operator and from the airline to their customer as soon as they've checked in, as soon as they've bought a ticket, where you can really personalize the journey. They'll alert you, oh, you haven't chosen your seat yet. You are a very valuable frequent flyer. You can choose a seat up front. We advise you to give up your seat in row 38. Why didn't you? We welcome you your seat in row 12. You're allowed to bring. We would like to remind you, dear customer, you're allowed to bring on 2 carry-ons because you're a frequent flyer within our system, and so forth and so forth. So there's really lots of personalization that is ongoing in the communication with the actual customer. And then, of course, there's also communication between the airport and the airline. We will have lots of snow tomorrow, so it'll be likely that some of the flights will be late departing, but also late coming in from Frankfurt or from the next town over. So there's lots of communication now that work through either an app or just an airport platform. Munich Airport has a employee-wide operational app that really gives tons of individual operational issues, operational information on irregularities, on overbooking, on queues that form somewhere. You collect throughout the operation of an airline and an airport tons of information that you then build into personalizing the communication with your employees, with your customers, with the airlines, and with the passengers.
Great. So I just want to thank you lots for sharing this information with us. If we have any questions, I will send it to you for your response. And thank you all for the participation. And if, as I said, if you have any questions, please send it to us and we will send the questions to lots. So have a great day and see you in our next webinar.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.